Everybody, thanks for tuning in today. I've got something very special for you. We have Cheryl Hodson, who's an entertainment attorney extraordinaire, and I was lucky enough to get her on an interview here. And one of the biggest things that has sort of been coming up a lot is there's been a lot of songwriters who've been asking about copyright. You know, can I have my song floating out there? Someone going to steal it? How do I protect my song? Are people constantly, ripping off lyrics and music and doing this stuff? So instead of me answering this, as you know, I like to go straight to the top. And so I got Cheryl, who's an expert in all of this stuff. And Cheryl has basically had a long career in entertainment law. Before that, she was even a music manager. She worked in publishing. And so she's got an extremely well-rounded, set of abilities to bring to what she does now. And Cheryl, you were saying one of the most coolest moments in your life, which is amazing, is the Kingsmen, who everybody knows wrote Louie Louie, the famous song from the 50s, I guess, right? It's from the 50s.
Oh, it's actually the early 60s.
Early 60s, okay.
And small correction, they did not write the song. They recorded it and made it famous.
Got it.
Yes.
Because
of the lyrics were supposedly dirty. And
right.
That's what made the song famous, because nobody could understand the lyrics.
Interesting.
And some kid came home for Thanksgiving and was listening to it in her room. And the parents thought it sounded obscene, so they reported it, and it ended up with the Attorney General in Kentucky. And then it got on the AP wires and went nationwide, and suddenly everybody had to hear this song with the dirty lyrics.
Of course. Yeah, that's the way it goes, right? That's funny how that works.
You should be so lucky nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. But your claim to fame was that you managed to get the masters, who had been owned by other people, I guess,
yes.
A little bit nefarious, and you managed to go to court over 4 years and get the masters back for the band.
Yeah, it was about a 3.5-4 year process. Yeah,
That's amazing.
The technical term was we rescinded the recording agreements because they never got paid. And the interesting piece of trivia was that one master, they did 5 albums, but their one master for Louie Louie was something they recorded on their own for $38 in a recording studio in Portland, Oregon. And I think it was around 61, I think. It's either 59, 60, or 61, somewhere in there. And one of them's father wrote the check and paid for the recording. So that's why nobody could understand the lyrics, because they weren't very good.
Right, understood. No, that makes perfect sense. So, thank you so much for doing this today, Cheryl. Really appreciate it. So one of the first questions, the obvious first question, just to get down to the basics, is, what basically essentially is a copyright, and why do we have copyrights for music?
Okay. Well, a copyright it's a property right. It's no different than owning a house or a car. The only difference is it's intangible, not tangible, right? You can't see it or touch it. But it's actually a right that's in the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the U.S. Constitution, the forefathers, when they drafted the Constitution, included a provision that gave Congress the right to enact laws to protect the rights of inventors and artists, and that includes songwriters. So the copyright law has been around since almost the beginning of our country. And various forms or another. But a copyright it's a bundle. The best way to describe it is it's a bundle of sticks with a ribbon tied around it. And when it comes to music, there's different rights that come along with that copyright. And I'll just mention several of them now. One of them is the right to publicly perform the song. The other is to reproduce it in copies, which would either be sheet music or records, to distribute it. So the distribution right can actually be handled separately, to prepare derivative works. So each of those rights is separate and distinct. And in copyright, it's divisible. So one is free to sell or license, which license is another term for renting, basically. When it's a copyright, we call it a license. But it's like renting your house. So you can rent the copyright out, okay? You can rent it out exclusively, or you can rent it out non-exclusively, which means other people can use it at the same time. Whereas if it's exclusive, you're only giving it to one person for probably a long period of time. So anyway, those are some of the rights that go along with a copyright. And, and it's a right that's guaranteed. It's the duration is what's interesting. It's now life of the author plus 70 years.
Okay, interesting. Okay, and so the big question is that you know, a lot of songwriters want to know is are songs being ripped off on a regular basis? I mean, is this something that's constantly happening? I know it's a fear for a lot of songwriters when they put their song up there for whatever reason, whether it's been just recorded or they're just sort of sending it maybe to a studio, or they're going to, you know, put it online in any form when it hasn't been maybe protected yet. Is this a rampant problem that you run into?
I don't think it's rampant, but, you know, look, I think it's really important for purposes of this discussion for songwriters to understand how the copyright works and why it's so important to register your copyrights. Okay, in theory, you have a copy. Well, it's not in theory. The way the statute is actually worded, copyright vests in the author from the moment of creation. So if I create something that's copyrightable, in this case, we're talking about music and songs, but it might be a piece of art. It could be a photograph. It can be a sculpture. It could be a video. It could be a motion picture. It could be a lot of different things that qualify for copyright. But for purposes of a music, from the moment you compose the music, you own the copyright. Okay, but that's a little misleading because all of the remedies and the rights to enforce the copyright are tied to registration. So you can't sue anybody until you actually register it in Washington. And then if they've already stolen the song or taken the song, it's a little late to register it, right? Because the whole idea of registration is to create constructive notice to the world that you have a registration. And why is that so important? Because there's two key things that are really, really important. It costs so much money to sue somebody for copyright infringement. It's like almost impossible to afford to sue somebody. So they're going to create a lesser court coming up pretty soon with this Music Modernization Act, I think, which will help. Mm-hmm. But if you have not registered the song before someone infringes your copyright, that means deposited a copy in Washington, D.C. at the Copyright Office. If you have not done that before someone infringes, you cannot claim what's called statutory damages or attorney's fees if you have to go after somebody. And now, I'm going to get a little bit technical, but I think it's important. Statutory damages means that you can, the judge or whoever you go in front of can assess damages, or you can negotiate a payment if you're trying to settle it yourself through a lawyer. You can negotiate something without proving actual damages if you have that registration. It can be somewhere between a modest amount up to $25,000, and if it's willful, it can be up to $150,000 per infringement. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
But the burden of proving actual damages in a copyright case is enormous. It would have to be somebody that sold millions of copies of something, right? Which that doesn't happen very often. So, and then they get to deduct their overhead, all these expenses to get down to what their profit was. So you're spending all this time trying to prove that somebody made money off of stealing your work.
Right.
Whereas if it's already registered, you bypass that step. You can just claim damages. But and then the second thing is you lose the right to attorney's fees if you win, if you haven't registered it. So, you know, without the registration, people often just thumb their nose at you and say, too bad, sue me, because they know you don't have any arrows in your quiver, so to speak.
Gotcha.
Now, take one last point about this is it's very cheap. It's $30. You can do it online. You can upload the songs now. You don't even have to send them in. Or you can fill out the form and send them on a CD or a thumb drive. You can register 50 or 100 songs at once on one form. It's cheap. Do it. Register your songs. That's all I can say. It's really, really important to register your songs. And
Wow.
I can't tell you how many people over the years have come to me and said, oh, well, so-and-so took my song or whatever. Did you register it? No. Well, guess what? I mean, it's so inexpensive and it's such an easy process. If that's your profession and you're a songwriter, it's something you need to learn to do.
Gotcha. Okay. So if somebody didn't register their song, what you're saying is that they could still prove that the song basically, that everything is fine, that the song is, that they can prove in a court of law that they own the song. But the problem, I guess, comes down to the burden of proof is so expensive, rather than if you register it for $30, it becomes a no-brainer.
A lot less. Right. And it's not just burden of proof, it's how much money can you get out of somebody? Can you get damages without proving actual damages? That the other person, that's where the burden is. It's the proof on the fact that the other person made money. If it's statutory damages, there's another term called in lieu of. So you can elect to have statutory damages in lieu of actual damages. That means you don't have to prove how much money somebody made in order to get money out of them.
Gotcha. Okay. And now, does that mean that the old thing that people used to do back in the day, mailing a song to themselves?
I have no idea who started that. It's a bunch of BS.
Really?
Don't bother.
All right. And then also the whole idea of, emailing. So you emailed your song to your mother or something, and somebody then, you can prove that email.
I guess all that does is you can say that as of that date, the song was in existence, but it doesn't have anything to do with protecting the copyright. It's not. It might document that you wrote it as of a certain date, that it was in existence, but it doesn't do anything else. As far as legal rights, it means nothing.
Right. Okay. Interesting. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was, what are some of the developments happening in music copyright these days, and especially online? I know that there was the Music Modernization Act that was passed in the U.S. Something recently got passed in Europe. That's quite a long thing to talk about. But, you and I spoke that maybe we could do a second part to this, right? Like we could treat this as part one, and this could be a part one thing for copyright. And then we could really get into the nitty gritty of the future of copyright and how that's going to impact songwriters' royalties, which is critical. That's already happening, right? We've already got things that are being passed, which is amazing. So thanks a lot for doing this. Let's get down and do part two very shortly.
Okay.
And I'm sure everyone's going to love this. Love this whole.
Yeah, we'll talk. Well, in part two, we'll talk a little bit more about what the specific sources of income are, and to make sure that if you have songs that are being exploited and you have a chance to earn income, that you figure out how to collect that income.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Cheryl.
You got it. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.